Between December 2016 and July 2017, I led a strategic research project funded by Winchester School of Art. The project explores arts funding in the UK by focusing on the research application processes and the arts professionals who engage with them. The project involved working with Southampton's 5 Arts Council England national portfolio organisations. The first workshop in February involved co-designing some of the questions we were looking at. This was followed by a research visit to each organisation in which we did narrative interviews, looking at arts policy processes and practices, and looking at different roles and responsibilities, and object interviews in which we actually explored some of the funding applications. The project culminated in a one-day workshop with participants from industry, academia and policy.
I think when I consider the day, I look at it through the lens of finance and fundraising, and what's been particularly outstanding for me is to look at how we access it, and also what are the challenges around accessing it. Dan has brought together a variety of information which is really useful to consider how we look at these challenges and find our way through them as we move forward.
So there's been a whole load of different things actually. Strategic decision making around arts and arts funding in different parts of the country. Thinking about what those maybe place-based factors are that go into decision making around arts funding and go into ideas around access or confidence to apply for different streams of funding.
The cheat sheet for Grants for the Art that Rachel presented was really helpful. We get a lot of inquiries from artists who are doing Grants for the Arts applications. So being able to kind of signpost the cheat sheet that she did, I think will be really helpful for us doing any other applications that involve granting, but also everyone who's doing Grants for the Arts applications.
I think we've mostly been hearing about the kind of experiences of arts organisations in terms of the sort of mixed model of funding and how they navigate that territory in order to make their organisations work essentially. And I'm particularly interested in how technology might help to change some of the ways that they operate in that space, and whether there are kind of new ways in which they might go about working that would unlock new sources of funding for them potentially.
The role of a fundraiser in an organisation can be very intense, and you're trying to sell your vision, your project to a third party, and the opportunity to discuss that role with other organisations going through the same thing has been invaluable.
The other thing I found really helpful kind of overall was when we had the interview and we were kind of talking about best practice, and it's things that I could hear myself saying but wasn't necessarily doing. So it kind of almost gave me a shake-up about what I really should be doing.
What I found really interesting about today was that actually mix of participants allowed us to look at different aspects of the kind of resource development and funding process. So we were able to think about the kinds of the technologies and the technocracies of arts funding, how you apply, what elements of the application process for public funding are kind of barriers for different social groups. So it was interesting to be in a space where there was an opportunity to hear from arts sector organisations, from arts leaders, about how their experiences fit or didn't fit with those kinds of findings, and also to think about whether there are new possibilities that might create a kind of more equitable system through which we make great art happen.
We've been focusing primarily on public funding and private funding in terms of charitable trusts and foundations. We're in the process of diversifying, and we're looking at corporate giving and sponsorship and individual giving.
What I think is also interesting is the way that diversity has now entered the scene as something that can be a barrier to organisations getting funding. So it used to be that diversity and the lack of diversity was seen to be something the Arts Council has to be responsive to. But what we're hearing from some organisations and informally in discussion is that if organisations that are smaller can't demonstrate that they're going to impact around diversity across multiple social characteristics and scales, then they feel they can't go forward.
I guess participation through individual giving, that's something that I'm particularly interested in. I think there's a lot to be done in terms of working out how it works and what the possibilities are for that, not just about generating income for organisations, but actually how that might achieve some of the goals around participation itself.
I think in an industry like the arts and culture, and especially for charities, where resources can be quite limited, process becomes even more critical to ensure that we can be as efficient as possible and successful in the process of doing it.
Future research, I really think it would be useful to kind of look at other fundraising models. So actually, is this fundraising model going to be sustainable going into the future? I know that people like the Arts Council are making a big push on encouraging organisations to increase their earned income. So not just looking at trusts and foundations, individuals, looking at how we can use things like gallery hire, the shop, but kind of going beyond that and looking at how any arts organisations can be more entrepreneurial in terms of raising income. So I think that would be a really useful thing to kind of explore further, to look at how maybe we could work together to do something that generates income above and beyond what we're already doing, just so we are more resilient going into the future.
The need for further research on how arts funding applications are constructed, the need for further research into working practices in the arts, and the sustainability of working practices in the face of continued financial uncertainty.